do you want to be remembered as the guy who kept the systems running, or the guy who successfully burned down the industry's bad habits to build something real?
So I don't want to be remembered for uptime or stopping a breach. I want to be remembered as someone who helped the industry grow, who helped make it okay to admit that we're not doing, or what we're doing isn't working, and help build it back into something better. So burning things down isn't about destruction. It's about making room for what actually works. If we've been doing it this way for the last 20 years and we're still getting breached, something's got to change.
Joshua Copeland is a United States Air Force veteran with 25 years plus of cybersecurity and is known for his best-selling book, The Unpopular Opinion. If you had to give the current state of global cybersecurity a grade A through F based on proper framework you envision, what grade do we get and why?
I'd say we get a solid.
Hello and welcome to the show. Today we are hosting Joshua Copeland. So this discussion is purely about Joshua's unpopular opinion. So he'll be discussing to us what he means by unpopular opinion and why he's called the Unpopular Opinion Guy. So for starters, Joshua, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here and happy to chat with you.
You published a book called Unpopular Opinion, Burning Down the Bull to Rebuild Cybersecurity. That's not a gentle critique. It's a demolition. After 25 years in the industry, what is the single biggest, most expensive bull misconception in cybersecurity that you are trying to burn to the ground?
I think the biggest and most expensive misconception we have that, I want to burn down would be that cybersecurity believes in buying controls equals security. We've trained executives to think that it's a shopping problem instead of a decision-making problem. So we buy a tool, have a dashboard, get a certification, all while attackers exploit the gaps between our people, process, and the reality that we live in. Security failures don't happen because we have controls that are missing. They happen because organizations as a whole don't behave the way that our diagrams say they do. The misconceptions burn budget, burn out teams, and give leadership a false sense of safety.
That's interesting. You talked of the diagrams. What do you mean by the diagrams?
So we have all these great things of org charts and process flows, and this is how we're going to do this thing. And then I go look at it and go, who's actually doing these things? And you look at the org chart, the person who's actually doing it's not the person who the org chart says, or there's a process for this particular thing. And I look at the person who's doing that and go, okay, show me how you do that. And it doesn't match the documented process that we have. So you have all these things where there's what we present to our board, our auditors, all our decision makers that say, this is how things look in our ideal situation. But that often doesn't match the reality of our organization.
Yeah, that is interesting because I feel like that's like a big systemic problem in our industry that you throw all that during the policy part where they want to audit and all that. Then later on, we forget about all these things. According to you, if you had that proper framework, how do you actually start it? And how do you actually bring it out to the C-suite, CISO, who doesn't know about tech completely? How do you actually bring it up for him to be on board?
To a CEO with a zero tech background, I'd kind of go for these three critical points. Security is a risk decision. It's not a tool. If you can't explain the risk that you're willing to accept and why you're willing to accept it, you're not doing security. And that's often not a technical discussion. That is a risk appetite discussion based off of your regulatory and your capital. Second one is people fail before systems do. Designed for human behavior under pressure, not for ideal workflows. We have all the pretty charts and the diagrams that say this is exactly how things are going to be done. But is that how we're actually going to work when it's, end of your quarter and you're trying to get all your sales in? Is that going to be how you're actually going to work when you do have a breach and you have this great laid out plan that you've exercised on a tabletop 30, as soon as you actually have the real breach, the book goes out the window. And then with that, the third point is resilience is our best prevention. Everyone's going to get breached eventually. The question is, how fast do you detect it? How fast do you respond? And how fast do you recover without all the chaos around a breach. If you can talk to those three things, everything else is implementing details. So if I can get the CEO to understand that it's all about making competent risk-based decisions, building processes that are people-centric, and how to be resilient, we should have a good company.
Yeah. Now, if you dig deep into that, you'll find that most of the times when you're having those conversations, they might say that we have actually never been breached before. So what's the whole point of this? Nothing is happening. Nothing is going wrong. How do you approach that?
That's the thing is you might not know that you've been breached before because you might not have the tooling in place to know that you were breached. These are situations that it's fairly classic in both IT and cybersecurity of nothing's happening. What do we pay you to do? Or nothing works. What are we paying you for? A lot of this is being able to explain back to the business, here are the true risks to the business and explain that in the dollars and cents that they understand, because they're not going to understand what a KEV is or a, CVSS score. That doesn't matter to them. They want to know if what I have running in my environment, what's that going to do to me as it relates to our productivity, our bottom line, and our reputation. If I can talk to those things, that's where they'll get it. If I can tell them the difference between, doing this upgrade to this tool set because it will close this gap, will enhance it to where if we are breached, we can demonstrate in court that we did due diligence and we're not liable for it. Our insurance will pay. We won't take the reputational hit and we'll still be in business, 6 months from now.
Now, one thing I usually find confusing is when it comes to the dollar amount. How do you quantify that dollar amount when you be like, okay, this is how much not buying the phishing tool will cost us as an organization?
And that's one of those things where a lot of folks don't tie it back to mission impact. They kind of use black magic, spooky numbers that they get from whatever vendor. And it goes back to, if this happens, what's my impact on the business? If someone clicks on this link that allows them to transfer $100,000 because they had a targeted phishing against our CFO organization, that's where the real money is involved. This is where I can demonstrate actual harm to my organization. I can demonstrate, the classic smishing emails or texts that are out there where they're like, hey, this is the CEO of this company. I need you to go buy, $1,000 gift cards for Amazon for a customer gift. I can't do it right now. Can you run out and get that for me in the next hour? It's pressuring those kind of things of relaying back to authority, time pressure, stress. And I can demonstrate, well, you're going to lose $1,000 because somebody made a poor choice. And can I look at the tool that I'm going to implement that and go, does it meet a regulatory compliance thing? Yes or no? Well, if it meets a regulatory thing, that means we can operate. Does it help with my cybersecurity insurance? Do they require it? Or if they don't require it, will it reduce my bill there? And then what's the actual impact of if this does happen, those dollar amounts factored in. So that's kind of where I look at it from the dollars and cents of, I'm going to pay $50,000 for, security awareness training tool, but now I'm able to complete my ISO 27001, my SOC 2 type 2, my PCI, DSS, my HIPAA third-party attestation, and have well-documented, defined industry standard practices that I didn't have to develop on my own that would take headcount to do that. And I can also say, now my cybersecurity insurance is going to go down and I now don't have the potential for this loss. Or the loss is reduced because more people are less likely to fall for it.
Yeah, at least that quantifies it better and more clearly for someone actually to take on. With your background, first of all, your background is fascinating and really polarizing. The fact that you're in the Air Force and then you now decided to actually become a civilian. I don't know if you're still you consider yourself a civilian right now. I'm not yet sure. But how do you reconcile the rigid discipline of the military with the patience required for peace building when you are negotiating with difficult business stakeholders today?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So the military taught me how to have absolute clarity under pressure, but the peace building taught me patience with humans. In business, stakeholders, they're not the enemy. They're stressed, they're incentivized differently, and they often are slow and afraid to make changes because they're afraid of what the outcomes of those things are going to be. So you don't necessarily lead with authority or empathy alone. You have to lead with context. So you don't win negotiations by being right. You don't win by aligning your security outcomes with, industry standards. You win by aligning your security outcomes with the things that keep your leadership awake at night: revenue, reputation, responsibility.
Okay. If you had to break down those three, how do you usually handle it?
Ultimately, it's revenue is always your first because everyone cares about money. Then I look at reputation. What's the organization going to be harmed or conversely raised up based off of what we're doing? Because for a lot of organizations, particularly if you're selling a product, if you're selling a service, your cybersecurity reputation matters because that's a huge thing in 2026 in the current environment. People care about how secure your organization is. And if it's not secure, you will quickly be outpaced by a competitor who is. And then responsibilities, aligning these things that people go, well, that's a cybersecurity thing. Like, yes, cybersecurity has a piece to it, but ultimately this is part of your responsibility and your role. If it's a OT system where you're running all these PCI controllers and running machinery, I can do so much, but ultimately the operations of the side of the house owns that equipment. So if that goes bad and you're the one who told me I can't fix it, you're the one that's going to own the responsibility for that bad action. And having that conversation really drives that coming together and understanding just because this might affect this thing, here's the second and third order effects. If we make that risk-based decision of going, okay, we have a new patch for our controller cards. Great. But right now we're in the middle of a production run. The cybersecurity guy says, we should patch this immediately. The operations guy goes, if we do that, that's going to cost us millions of dollars. So we have to come together and go, okay, I can put these other mitigating controls around it. I'll put it further in our network, get some air gap going, make sure that it's harder to get to than what it previously was. And then when we do a tooling change out or where you're changing our production line, that's when we'll update those cards so they have the newest, most secure version of that firmware. And it's having that conversation and having a little bit of give and take. It's not, you will do it because I said so because I'm the security guy. You will never get buy-in from that.
Yeah, true. Now, interestingly, you've done all the SOC work. In fact, I need to use you as my encyclopedia just in case I am down somewhere. But yeah, so you've been from the junior SOC to now tier 3 analyst to SOC manager to now director of enterprise security, overseeing global teams. You've seen the alerts on the ground. When you sit in board meetings now, do you feel there is a dangerous disconnect between the C-suite thinks about security and actually the reality of the burning fires of the SOC team?
Yeah, I do think there is a disconnect, and I do think it's absolutely dangerous. And it's a matter of how we talk to each other. Boards talk in terms of maturity models and color coded dashboards. Are we red, yellow, or green? SOC teams are fighting alert fatigue, bad telemetry, unclear authority when a real incident happens. And the disconnect isn't ignorance, it's kind of abstraction. Leadership sees policy compliance, and operators see failure modes. So my job now is to translate the burning fires into what business impact actually occurs to the organization without sanitizing the truth and making it look better than it actually is. And if leadership is comfortable, security is probably lying to them.
Why do you say so?
Because the simple matter is that vulnerabilities are being discovered at a exponential rate. Threat actors are everywhere and everyone is a target, whether you're a defense industrial base organization that is dealing with building fives or new missile systems, or you're a mom and pop business, grocery store, nail salon, massage parlor, whatever, you're still a target. It's just a matter of what level of target are you? If you're a defense industrial base, you're probably going to be targeted by the nation state actors, whether it's China, North Korea, Russia. But if you're in those smaller businesses, you're going to be attacked by Russian cyber gangs. You're going to be attacked by, political hackers who are just looking to get money because you're low hanging fruit. You have bad security postures. You're easy to hit. And I can do that at scale, particularly now with AI tools that enable me to rapidly evolve my tooling from a red team adversary perspective. If I can hit, 1,000 very small companies that have very low cyber security postures and ransom you for, $1,000, well, that's $100,000. and I've done really nothing except for run some automated tools. Like it's the difference between going after long time for big fish or very short times for multiple little fish.
It's a numbers game, technically. Yeah. And again, also the big companies are usually more stressful to handle compared to the mom and pops where it's their livelihood on the line to some point.
Yeah. Big company is going to have a breach. Their stock's going to tank for a few months and then it's going to be back to normal business. Great examples of that are Target, Equifax, yeah, Target got breached, their stock tanked, and now they're back up and everyone still goes to Target. Everyone still shops there. It is what it is. They were able to get through that relatively quickly. When you start looking at the small businesses, they're very, very hard to recover, particularly when those fines for, state, local government, a national government, a lot of them don't realize all the things they have to comply with. You have a single customer in your database that is an EU citizen, and now all of a sudden your mom and pop company in the middle of nowhere in Nebraska now has to comply with GDPR.
Yeah.
But they don't realize that because they don't have a robust cybersecurity team because, frankly, cybersecurity is expensive to have.
You emphasize deep collaboration across IT, but to be honest, most of the times you find that the product teams want speed, then the security team wants breaks. When these two are actually colliding, how do you handle that with your unpopular opinion?
So ultimately, cybersecurity has gotten the reputation of being the department of no, which
That's very true.
is the last thing we should be. We should be the department of yes, if. So my unpopular opinion for this is security shouldn't be the brakes. It should be the guardrails. So when product and security collide, I don't argue controls. I ask questions. What's the fastest safe path for us to do this? What failure are we willing to tolerate? Who owns the risk if this breaks? And those questions really kind of draw out, what is acceptable in our organization. So as a security leader, I lose all credibility if the only answer I ever give is no. Product loses trust when they ignore the consequences of bad security decisions. So we have to build a framework in between us that works when both sides understand what the trade-offs are and they're not absolutes. I can tell you, this is what best practice is. This is where you are. What happens if we don't do this? They can tell me we get to market faster. We're able to do this. And the risk of that happening is very, very low because of these second, third order things.
Yeah. That's true. I think people usually take it for granted when it comes to cybersecurity. We are supposed to just tie into the whole idea. But I feel like most of the times you find that it's just blocked on top. Cybersecurity is usually an afterthought for many organizations. How do you bring about change still in such a setting? What's the best approach according to you?
I find being very proactive is super helpful. Knowing what the teams are, what their concerns are, and coming to them before they ask, saying, I want you to do this because this security reason. And I've thought about these, 3 impacts that are going to happen to you. So if I make you do a MFA transaction every time you do something that changes a critical record, I know that adds an extra 5 seconds. Now, as a cybersecurity guy, I go 5 seconds isn't that much. But if I do the math and exponentialize that and go, well, 5 seconds times 3,000 employees times, 100 transactions a day, that becomes a substantial amount of time and that reduces the work thing. So it's like, okay, where can we get a compromise on this? I want to make sure that we have high fidelity, that the people making these transactions are who they are supposed to be, but I don't want it to impede your work. So do we do a compromise where you have to do a MFA authentication every 30 minutes, not tied to every transaction? That way I give a little, you give a little, and we still get a better security posture. And by walking through that and understanding what they're doing, that gives them kind of that warm fuzzy that I'm not dictating to them what they need to do. I understand what their problems are and what the things I do impact them. And that kind of helps guide that conversation along.
Yeah, I think that's the best approach because now you find that definitely things have to run and then you don't have to also put so much security to the point that it also makes the product unusable.
Always the friction point with security of if it's very, very secure, it's not usable. If it's completely usable, it's not secure. And you have to find kind of that medium friction point where it's secure enough to meet your regulatory compliance requirements and your board's confidence level for security, but not so secure that people find ways around the thing that you want them to use. I'll show my age and go back to when Microsoft Exchange first came out with the ability to do file filtering, sending emails. It took all of 24 hours for people to figure out that you could change a .zip file to a .txt and it would go through. Humans are extremely smart and in, I will say, some of the best ways, extremely lazy. They will find the easiest path to do their job that they can. And if that involves going around your tooling, you've built a bad security product.
Yeah, that is true. You are saying that you didn't want to show your age, but that gray part of your beard already showed your so when it comes to you've touched a bit of AI, but since you're a lecturer, you've actually taught how to use actually AI in machine learning and all that. So definitely everyone is rushing to AI, but how can we actually use it effectively in terms of vulnerability management?
For vulnerability management specifically, AI is a great tool because it can help you rapidly determine what your vulnerabilities are, how you can potentially exploit those vulnerabilities, and what your threat landscape looks like. It can also help you do threat modeling. If my tooling stack has these 6 vulnerabilities, can they be daisy chained together to gain access to my system? It can help you build out, tabletop scenarios around the vulnerabilities that you do have. So AI is one of those things where it can be really great, but it also can be, a bit of, if we're on it, and it depends entirely on how you use it.
So definitely, do you actually think that it's actually introducing more threats than before? How do you manage that?
Yeah. So I think AI introduces new capabilities and new threats. When it's used well, it can help you scale rapidly. It can do pattern recognition, increase response speed. When it's used poorly, it becomes security theater with better marketing. Right now, a lot of organizations are deploying AIs without governance, without data hygiene, and without threat modeling. That's not really innovation. That's just automating risk. AI won't save a broken security program. It'll just make it fail faster. So when you're doing things with AI, pick a single use case, figure out how that's going to help you do whatever it is that you do better, faster, and cheaper, and build the appropriate governance around it. Who has access to it? Why do they have access to it? What decisions are the AI allowed to do? Am I going to allow AI to make critical decisions? Where's my human in the loop for that to make sure that it's not going off the rails? We have examples from big vendors where the AI model threatened to expose a developer's affair so it wouldn't get turned off. We had a AI model that wanted to contact the FBI because it thought it was being hacked. So we have to have kind of really good guardrails to make sure that we're using AI appropriately. It's a great tool. It can do a lot of good things, but it can do a lot of harm if it's not run properly. And that's why the EU AI Act, why ISO 42001 are going to be critical going forward because they help define what good management looks like and what you should and shouldn't use AI for.
I feel like that is one thing which our policies should actually implement for many organizations. And according to you, what are those first key metrics that we need to look at in terms of AI? Are we supposed to put all our AIs in-house? How do we manage that whole process to best avoid incidents and also to best avoid, because I think the biggest challenge with AI is more of that because we feed it a lot of data and then, yeah.
I speak at a lot of conferences and I ask this question quite a bit of, how many of you think that you have AI in your environment? And I get about half the audience will raise their hand. And I'll look at them very straight and plain and tell them, those of you who didn't raise your hand are lying to yourself. Every organization has AI in your environment. It's just whether or not you realize you have AI. If you have people who have Grammarly installed, there's AI in that. You have people who have a cell phone, there's AI in that. They're using a browser. Chrome has AI built into it. Google has AI built into it just for Google search. AI is in your environment. So you need to build out really good governance on what you want AI used for and what you don't want AI used for, and have appropriate teeth in those policies that if someone uses AI inappropriately, there is a means to either reprimand them, retrain them, or ultimately potentially get rid of them as an employee because they're introducing additional risk. One of the things that organizations really should do is if you're going to have AI in your environment, it based on your use case. If you want to deal with a lot of proprietary stuff, maybe you want to bring a LMM into your own enclave, build that out in your own infrastructure and run it there. Or you go and buy a ChatGPT corporate license and ensure that it has zero data retention and you're able to do some DLP features with that where you can limit what can go in and out and then enforce that all your users use your purchased ChatGPT or Gemini or insert whatever tool here, tooling, rather than using their free account that they're getting because they want to use ChatGPT to write better emails or they want to do cool product descriptions on your pre-release product that nobody should be seeing yet. They're uploading photos to help write that then end up getting leaked someplace else. There was a case several years ago where code from, I want to say Samsung got leaked because their developers were putting it into a AI model to help them clean up the code. So it's all about figuring out what your use cases are and what's the best use of that tool in your environment that you can have the right guardrails saying, okay, these are the things we can use AI for. These are the things we can't use AI for. We can use AI to do automated replies to emails. We can't use AI to make HR hiring and firing decisions. And if you use AI for this, that's fine. If you get caught using it for that, you're terminated on the.
Okay, thank you for that. You've been actually a professor for quite some time. If you had to give the current state of global cybersecurity a grade A through F based on proper framework you envision, what grade do we get and why?
I'd say we get a solid C minus. The joke is C's get degrees. I think we're technically capable, but we're operationally immature. We over-index on tools, we underinvest in people, and we tend to avoid hard conversations and accountability. So the potential's there, but the discipline just isn't quite there yet. And that's something that, as an industry, we have to work on having those hard conversations. And I think the number one skill that, as cybersecurity practitioners, that we need to work on is understanding business because it's impractical for us to expect the people on the business side of the organization to learn cybersecurity. But we absolutely should understand the business that we're working in because that influences how we do cybersecurity and why we do the things that we do. So if we get folks that learn the business and can talk in the dollars and cents instead of the bits and bytes, that grade will go up exponentially.
Okay, so ultimately, you want to leave behind a proper posture for cybersecurity. 10 years from now, do you want to be remembered as the guy who kept the systems running or the guy who successfully burned down the industry's bad habits to build something great?
So I don't want to be remembered for uptime or, stopping a breach. I want to be remembered as someone who helped the industry grow, who helped make it okay to admit that we're not doing or what we're doing isn't working and help build it back into something better. So burning things down isn't about destruction. It's about making room for what actually works. If we've been doing it this way for the last 20 years and we're still getting breached, something's got to change. Clearly what we're doing isn't working. So we need to rip and replace, put in the stuff that will actually work. And that's what I kind of want to remember for, is someone who helped nudge us the needle just a little bit closer to being more secure, because ultimately cybersecurity is about protecting people.
Yeah. Now, definitely, you're known for your book, The Unpopular Opinion. Could people in the audience tell them a little bit of why they should go and actually purchase the book?
It's a book that I've wrote based off of for the last 4 years of writing unpopular opinions almost daily on LinkedIn and having conversations at conferences. And really, it was just the genesis of figuring out how we can have a conversation about things that are wrong in cybersecurity, what we can do to fix them. I wrote it to where if you're brand new to cybersecurity or you've been a CISO for the last 10 years, you should be able to get something out of it because it's really breaking it down to these core problems that we have, how we bring people into cybersecurity, how we have systems that aren't designed appropriately for the things that we need, and what things we can do to actually make those things better. So it's not the critique of here's everything that's wrong with cybersecurity. It's here are things that are wrong with cybersecurity, but also here are things that we can do to fix it. And it drives the conversation. I make no bones that everything I say is not always right. It's based off of my particular experience and my background. And there are more than one right answer to pretty much anything. The joke is Microsoft has 3 ways at least to do any particular thing. None of them are right. They're just different ways. I think the book presents a different way to do what's right and at least generates a conversation around it. And conversation is really what gets us moving the needle where we need it to be.
Yeah, thank you for that. As we are drawing towards the end, actually we are at the end, but I don't know why you said drawing. So if people want to find you, where can they find you? Where can they find your books, and how can they keep in touch with you?
Easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. I am Joshua Copeland. You can also follow my podcast, Criticality Live. My books are available on Amazon everywhere in the world. And then you can also follow me. There's Kick and YouTube have copies of our podcast. So happy to see you guys there as well.
Okay, I will definitely add all that in the show notes. Other than that, thank you for coming on the show. And I definitely picked a lot when it comes to SOC work. I am also in the SOC, so I was like, I need to hit each and every question I actually have so that I look good in front of my boss for my own selfish reasons. But yeah, thank you for coming on the show, and definitely I've picked a lot, and definitely our audience has definitely enjoyed you being on the show. And yeah, so go and check out the Unpopular Opinion book on Amazon, and check out his podcast. And other than that, see you all in the next episode.